I just finished my full deep dive of J. Cole's new project, The Fall Off, and at its best, it ends up on the right side of hip hop history in terms of attempts at a double album with great sampling, great rhyming, and a clear story and concept while keeping a listener engaged, as well as being J. Cole's best project. At its worst, though, it's a bit overambitious with some sequencing issues, and it gets a little sonically repetitive. And it often highlights J. Cole's insistence on not passing the ball, for example, in certain vocal attempts. I know I've heard some people say even in production. But let's get to it, with the HQ theory. Now, I know why you're here. I know you're just going to look at my list. You don't want to hear the rest of my rambling. You just want to know what I love, what I like, what I think is okay, and what record is making me ask, why is this here? Now, remember, if I say, why is this here, it doesn't always mean the record is bad, but I do have some questions. And with this double album, I'm just going to go with disc 29 first. So that's what you're seeing. Obviously, it's a double disc, so you got disc 1, aka disc 29, and then you've got the second disc, which is disc 2, aka disc 39. Why they named that? Let's get into it. Now, fortunately for us in this rollout, J. Cole does reveal a lot of stuff, right? Via the Inevitable website, he tells us the thought process behind creating this project, right? Disc 1, aka Disc 29, is him recalling a trip back to the Ville at 29 years old, which I believe would be somewhere around 2014, in which, he tells his story of where he's at with his career, his relationship, and his relationship with his hometown. So his project is a bit regional in that sense. And then disc 39 is obviously when he goes back at 39 with a different perspective. Now, when we go from about track 1 and 6 here, let's go back to my list real quick. Brothers, ladies and gentlemen, from about 1 or 6 or so, we're starting off this album on fire. I mean, the sequencing is done right? You see a lot of records that I love on disc 29 are the records at the beginning of the project, right? Cole starts off, I'm gonna be reading off my notes here, pardon me. He starts off with this James Taylor sample, which is another artist who wrote his song to recall his love for North Carolina and his upbringing, right? So now, I'm just gonna show that to you. I believe that's one James Taylor, Carolina in my mind. You get the point? So you get the inspiration there. And then you let that play in the background as we get kind of this same thought from a 29-year-old Jermaine's mind, right? You hear this mixed with some jovial conversations, and then it's interrupted with gunshots. This is going to be a large part of what this kind of visit from 29-year-old Jermaine back to Fayetteville is going to be like, right? And if he didn't tell us, I do think this intro, which I liked, does a good job of kind of getting us into this story and getting us to understand this concept, right? It's Jermaine went out, made something out of himself up to New York, and then is coming back to visit this place that he loves and adore. But reminder, it's still a war zone, aka Vietnam. And then we go to the next joint, which is 2-6, right? And I love 2-6, right? 2-6 is wild. It's a perfect display. It's a perfect display of Cole's strength and balancing things that aren't maybe his strong points, but he likes to do. Like, we could laugh at the Sexy Red type joint. And it's sitting, like, we can laugh at that cadence, but he rides that flow well, and it adds some excitement to Cole. I know a lot of people like to accuse him of being boring, but he's learned how to incorporate these things that may not be his strong point, right? He's very influenced by a lot of 90s hip-hop legend, but he does these things pretty well. And it's fitting for a 29-year-old with some bread coming back to Fayetteville as a top tier rapper. And he sounds like it in his vocalization. And we're going on a nice little sequencing right here, right? A sequencing run right now. Like it just feel like heaven when I listen to it multiple times, because we go from 2-6 to Safety. And Safety, to me, it's a masterclass on staying in concept. You can hear the influence of Nas, but then also the story along with the sampling gets you engaged. Shout out to Queen Latifah. I believe UNITY was sampled here, right? And Cole uses a friend to help the listeners, know what he had missed while he was gone. So he uses the perspective of this friend talking to him, letting him know what he's missed, how life has changed. People became parents. People got sick. People got hurt in the streets. Others passed. And he even mentions, quickly about this, hometown hater that might have developed envious sort of feeling on J. Cole's success. And then he even reflects on mistakes that they made with like a queer friend. Now, I know not everyone loved the approach on this, but I just want to let you guys know that one liner of, I wish we could apologize, we did him wrong, is doing a lot of carrying, so I'll allow it to slide, right? We keep going on records that we love. The next one would be Run a Train. And this, I have to admit, J. Cole does let someone else do some work. This is the strong point of the album. This is what I say things like at its best, because we get Future assistant on this track, and it's a welcome change of pace. It's a welcome change of tone. And yet again, it shows at least that at 29 years old, J. Cole understood that limitation, right? So we're still doing good. We're doing great. It's a call back to Black Friday. Remember that? What do you know about my pain, right? So it's Future crooning. And whatever relationship I have with Future solo, man, sometimes when Future gets with other people, I just say he's a different type of artist to me, right? But by enlisting someone like Future and letting him do some of the work, you get Cole getting to rap extremely well, particularly on the second verse, simply because Future's carrying the melodies, Future's carrying the hooks. So Jermaine can get his message out a little more. And when I say good sequencing, then we go into sort of that running into 910 space, right? Because remember, we're going from Run a Train to Poor Thin, another record that I love on this project. Now, if you don't know who 901 or 910 Space, I think that's the area code for Fayetteville. But Space is apparently this rapper that had been talking ish about Jermaine. Remember on Safety, his friend had said that. But anyway, we run into talking about this guy who is unfortunately the target on Poor Thin. But don't get it twisted. It's great production, great rapping, and it's got some grit, right? But I don't think Jermaine is just beating up on this sort of local rapper, but I think he does use this conversation about the local rapper and what the local rapper said about him and kind of talks about his upbringing, so it fits within the concept. Now, when he starts using that punk bitch a bunch of times, that's just beating up on him at that part is just because every time you see these guys now, you see him, you're going to say that. Now, I thought the sample with Bootsy set it off was very interesting. Now, hastily, we run into our first problem. We're rushing at it, right? And which is Legacy. Legacy is on here as a why for me. It's not that I outright hate this song. It's just that I have problems with the placement. Like, I get the justification of talking about his relationship. That was part of the story. And the woman, by the way, ends up being his wife. I just think it'd be moved down. And more importantly, sonically, I don't necessarily enjoy this. I don't love it. Maybe it's my affinity for tougher, grittier records, and I enjoy Cole rapping instead of singing. But I think this is a perfect example of a missed opportunity to let someone else carry the vocals. Now, shout out to PJ who does some of that on certain parts, particularly the outro. But this record, to me, could have got much better. Now, listen to it with time. It has grown to be a little tolerable. But my why is simply about the sequencing. Now, we get a hell of a rebound, though, because Cole gets back to understanding his moment, right? Understanding, letting other people carry. And that's where we get Thames and Future and apparently Bosch writing on Bunch Road Blues. Mind you, Cole vocalization here is still good, but he knows exactly where to get the hell out of there and let the other people work. And again, I feel like sequencing wise, the first line of this record is more fitting. Right? We can go, all y'all pussy, you shoot at the ops and run from the cops. That goes well with coming after Poor Thing. But anyway, it doesn't sound as technically advanced, but it does have great flows, and it does show you that, okay, this is the mindset of a 29-year-old Cole, right? Who is still hungry, kind of scratching the surface of being super advanced, but he now is driving around the street in Carolina and seeing what things are like. And shout out to the Alchemist flipping this, right? Flipping nice and slow to production there. But again, we keep going with great sequencing success with Who the F Is You, probably my favorite record off the album, and I think it's perfectly placed after Bunch Road Blues, and it should have been uninterrupted by Legacy. Not quite sure what we were doing there, and I believe there was a time for that. And this is braggadocious J. Cole. I love this beat. I love this concept. I mean, this is a guy saying, okay, get out the way. It's a real one coming through. This is 29-year Jermaine, who has accomplished a lot coming back home. Now, obviously, the records that I think are okay, Drums and Bass, Bombs in the Ville. Bombs in the Ville, a little too long for me. Hit the Gas has some hit potential. And then you get The outro, Lonely at the Top, should not have been a bonus.